Hey everyone, it's Cory McCarthy, and welcome to another Q&A, public Q&A event. For those that are catching this afterwards, as always, at the moment at least, this might change. I'm doing public Q&As every other Sunday, and then I have private Patreon-only Q&As that occur on the other Sundays. But I might actually be switching soon to doing public Q&As once a month and the private Q&As to the paying patron members 3 times a month. But that has yet to be seen. I'm actually mulling that over. I'll make a public announcement about it if that becomes the case. People are beginning to roll in right now. So as it stands right now, the next public Q&A is going to be April 29th. But if I switch these to once a month and do the private Q&As 3 times a month, that's going to obviously adjust. But for now, tentatively, the next public Q&A will be April 29th. The next Patreon Q&A is going to be next Sunday, the 22nd. For those who are members of my Patreon, and if you're not, it's like $2 a month, and you can get live intimate Q&As. It's a lot more intimate. You can get your questions answered a lot faster, and there's also a lot more of raw banter going on as well. And that'll be next Sunday, the 22nd, for the next patron Q&A. Anyway, so now that people are joining in, I'm going to roll over to the chat box and see what's happening. Just getting that set up. Okay, so the chat box is open. Johnny D says, I read that iron in meat is absorbed better than iron in vegetables. Do we really need meat? Laugh out loud. I did a video about this. Check out my 3rd video to Varg Vikernes. I talked about iron absorption in both the heme iron and the plant iron. I also talked about the risks of heme iron. It really depends on the person. Some people absorb plant iron better. Some people absorb heme iron better, but you'll still absorb both. But there can be a bit of disparity, or there can be very little disparity whatsoever. It depends on the person. But either way, heme iron is linked to colorectal cancer, and I mean it's very linked to colorectal cancer. There is a lot of evidence that that now we understand why red meat might actually be a carcinogen. It's because of the heme iron. And you find heme iron not just in red meat. You can find it in fish. You can find it in pork, like pig. It's found in a lot of different meats. It's not just in red meat. So it's but yeah, check out the Varg Vikernes video, the 3rd Varg Vikernes reply that I did within the past year. I'd say I think it's probably the past half a year, and you can get your heme iron questions answered there. Johnny says, also, is zinc found more in meat than in plants? No, there's plenty of plant sources that contain quite a bit of zinc. So again, I can't read them all off to you right now. I don't have them off the top of my head, but if you Google plant sources of zinc, you'll find that a lot of vegetables do contain zinc. So yeah. Slap says, I can't even pronounce the first part. It's in Chinese characters. Hi, Mr. Cory. Actually, it might be Japanese characters. I can't tell. It's so tiny, I can't really tell. Onkar says, hey, Cory, if I'm lean bulking, can I do 8-mile run once a week for cardio for MMA, or will it kill the gains? No, you should be doing cardio. Even if you're trying to gain weight, you should be doing cardio at least 3 times a week for at least about 20 to 30 minutes, even if it's like low intensity running, compared to like, sprint intervals or heavy bag intervals and that sort of thing. Just make sure, and this is what I tell people in the ebooks that I sell, actually, who want to gain mass. And I actually write the protocols out for you so you can do it properly. Like in Beast Mode by Science, for instance, I explained this in great detail. That you just want to bump up your calories that day to compensate for what you're going to lose potentially from the cardio. Because if your goal is to gain muscle and not maintain or not to lose fat, that is, you want to make sure you're getting enough calories to sustain all of the activity and build muscle. That's how you do that. IJOPS, well, he's talking to Johnny, so I guess this doesn't really let's see here. I'm not sure. Slap says, is zinc being an aromatase inhibitor a meme? I've never heard of zinc being an aromatase inhibitor. Zinc can optimize your testosterone if you're deficient in zinc. If you're not deficient in zinc, taking a zinc supplement isn't going, or getting it from diet isn't going to boost your testosterone levels. But men who have low zinc levels have lower testosterone levels. So when they start optimizing their zinc intake and getting their zinc levels back up, their testosterone rises, rises up as well from the deficiency. So yeah, you don't want to be deficient in zinc, but supplementing with zinc if you're not deficient isn't going to necessarily give you, better gains. So Onkar asks, how do I feel about fish? Fish are still sentient, and there's evidence that fish have complex societies, relatively. They're not like our societies, but I've done videos on fish, actually. My fish oil video that I did quite a while back, a couple of years back, maybe a few years at this point, explained talked about fish, actually. And they can feel pain. So I feel about fish the same way that I feel about cows and pigs and chickens, etc. It's that I don't see any point in why eat it. You're causing unnecessary harm, and you don't need it. There's alternatives that are just as helpful, and you can get omega-3s from flax seeds, from algae oil, chia seeds, hemp seeds, etc. Even like walnuts. You don't need to eat fish. Let's see here. Next question. Cory, what is your PR on deadlift? It sits around 500. Deadlift is my best lift. I want to get it up, but it was one of those kind of lifts that built really quickly. It actually builds really quickly for me. The quickest of my lifts to build, but now it's reaching a point where I'm like having trouble budging it any further. It's whereas my bench has always been horrible by comparison because of the fact that I have really long arms and I'm 6 feet tall. My arms pretty much, when I put them to my side, can almost touch my knees. The tips of my fingers can also almost touch my knees when I put my arms to my side. So I have very long arms, therefore I have leverage issues on bench press and overhead press, my worst lifts actually. So those continually go up gradually, but the deadlift is sort of like one of those that it's like it was joyously going up so well for a while, then it's kind of stagnates. I'm really trying to push it harder. But hey, that's how it works. Sometimes you'll have just one lift that will stagnate while your other lifts continue to climb. And, you've got to try to work on that. You struggle with that one lift, or maybe you'll have 2 or 3 lifts. It all depends on the person, depends on where you are at. I spent so many years bodybuilding, and now I'm kind of getting more into strength interests, I guess, just to try something different and also to improve those lifts that I just felt like I didn't want them to be, bodybuilder tier anymore, basically. So, because I feel like maybe I could eke more growth out of myself if I just pushed my strength even further and focused on that for a good while. But yeah, I'm really enjoying, doing more of a power building sort of focus. I mean, I've actually having a lot of fun with it. I'm enjoying it more than I actually enjoy bodybuilding, to be honest. The altruism activist says, what tips do you have for improving digestion on a plant-based diet? High carb, low fat versus high fat, low carb, water intake, timing, intuitive eating, etc. You got to find what works for you. There are some people, it really is, it comes down to the person. For instance, a high carb, low fat diet may be more difficult for somebody who doesn't have a gallbladder. Maybe you had gallbladder surgery and that can be a little more difficult. They can end up with, to be blunt, they can end up with the shits, basically, and they might need digestive enzymes to help them process the excess fat intake in a high fat, low carb diet. As for high carb, low fat, it also can depend on what kind of carbs we're talking about. To blanketly say, for instance, like Dr. McDougall does, that starches are the optimal carb is patently false, because there was a study that came out in 2014, I think it was 14, that showed that more than half of the global population lacks in AMY1, a gene that helps pre-digest starches. So they actually have a harder time digesting starches and might do better with fruit, for instance, as their source of carbs. So even under high carb, low fat, you need to take into account your personal digestibility of particular carbohydrate sources. And then furthermore, when it comes to low fat, I don't recommend anybody going below 20% of your maintenance calorie needs. So if your maintenance calories are 2,500 a day, 20% of that can come. 20% of those calories can come from fat sources, because that's what's been shown to optimize and prevent decline of hormones. So to be mindful of your hormones, don't go too low in fat. To be mindful of your genetic predisposition to digestion. Figure out what kind of carbs you digest better. Perhaps you're one of the people who can't handle starches as well. Maybe you're somebody who doesn't have a gallbladder and you can't handle fats very well. So all these things to be taken into account. So it's a very personal thing. As for water intake, just make sure you're getting enough per day. In my ebooks, actually, Beast Mode specifically, I talk about how much water everyone needs per day, depending on activity level as well. And intuitive eating, I'm not a big fan of that. But then again, I come from the mindset of sport performance, so I want to make sure that I'm getting everything I need, as opposed to just sort of winging it. I don't really believe in winging it. I'm kind of more of a prepper mindset in that regard. So but hey, if it's working for you and don't really have any sport goals, I guess that's and you don't have any health problems and your blood work is all fine, I guess it's working for you. But I don't personally subscribe to intuitive eating. Praise the Masculine Flame says, Varg thinks that civilization is about to collapse, mostly due to peak oil. What are your thoughts on this? I don't know about peak oil, but Varg seems to think the civilization, he's been thinking the civilization is going to collapse for a very long time now, and it still hasn't. Now, that being said, I do think that a collapse is inevitable. Historically speaking, collapses do occur. I do think that a collapse is inevitable. I think that we can't sustain the current way that we're going about things, like, just people getting free handouts and shit, and unlimited migration coming into Europe, for instance, and taxing a system where they're not contributing back in. There's a lot of things that are going to cause the system to fall apart. And you can only borrow so much until you've tapped out from the people you're borrowing from as well. So in my opinion, I do think that we're going to hit some kind of a collapse eventually as well, even socially, because we just seem to be cool with everything. They were even giving pedophiles a platform for a while. So yeah, I do think a collapse is going to happen. Whether it's going to happen in my lifetime or my children's lifetime, or my children's children's lifetime, I can't say, but historically, yeah, I'm sure we'll have a collapse at some point in time. Mr. Slap says, Mr. Cory, are you a Christian? No, I'm actually agnostic. I'm not an atheist either. I'm agnostic on the topic. I don't see any evidence that God exists. I don't see any evidence that God doesn't exist. So I remain agnostic on the topic and open-minded. But I don't think it's something I'll ever have an answer to. So I suppose I'll always be agnostic on the topic. The altruism activist says, tips to increase your appetite, improve digestion. Well, lifting weights definitely helps increase your appetite. Believe me, the more physically active you are, especially if you're lifting, the hungrier you're going to be. But as for improving digestion, there are foods you can take in, for instance, like pineapple or papaya, that contain natural enzymes that can help you digest other foods, like, for instance, proteins. You can do that. You can take digestive enzymes if you have a real serious problem with digestion. I hear people say that, I've never looked into this, so I don't know, that apple cider vinegar can help with digestion as well. Those are just some things that to consider. Can diet influence male pattern baldness? It can. I mean, if you're increasing your, it depends on the person, really. If you're increasing your DHT production, which is a form of testosterone, that is linked to male pattern baldness. It's also linked to body hair growth too. So men that have lower DHT doesn't mean they're lowering testosterone, just means they're lowering converting to DHT. Are men that have trouble growing beards, for instance. They're men that might have trouble with keeping a full head of hair. They tend to maybe have hairier chests, hairier backs, things like that. DHT does play a role in that. But that's really a genetic thing, whether you're predisposed to converting the DHT more than somebody else. But, a higher fat diet might, because it can help boost testosterone to a degree, might increase your DHT conversion. Creatine can do it too. So if you're not a vegan and you're eating things like red meat, for instance, that's very high naturally in creatine, you're definitely putting yourself at a higher risk from consuming that kind of food to hair loss, for instance, or hair growth, even excessive hair growth in certain areas. But yeah, diet can influence, in I guess perhaps an indirect manner, I suppose, because it's not the direct cause, so to speak, but it plays a role. It increases something that can increase the likelihood. The ideal amount of fat percentage to maintain hormone levels but without aggravating acne. Well, the lowest you can go is 8%. That's been studied. Below 8%, you begin to harm your hormone levels. But above like 20%, I believe it was 20%, might be 18%, but I think 20% was the highest you can go without becoming basically unhealthy. But 12%, and this is why I keep pushing this, and like my book Upgraded Man, I push this really hard. 12% has been found by fertile women to be the most attractive body fat percentage on a guy. So I always tell people, unless you're a competitor, shoot for a nice lean 12%. 12%, you'll still have somewhat visible abs. You'll look full because you'll still have some fat on your body, which does give you a little more fullness and roundness. And for a natural, that's it keeps you from looking like a string bean. And it's good for your hormones, and it's good for the ladies. So if you're a guy and you want to attract girls, the summer's coming up. 12% body fat is a great body fat percentage to shoot for and maintain at with some muscle mass, and you'll physically attract more women. Now, obviously, you've got to have a good personality too. You can't just expect your body's going to do it all. To a point, it's like the resume. It'll get you to the interview, but if you don't have the personality, you aren't going to get the job. That's an analogy I like to use about dating. Anywho. LSR Music says, in your opinion, is veganism sustainable in a collapse situation? If not, would you return to meat? I have said before, I am a vegan because I can be and because I choose to be and I want to be. But in a survival situation, I mean a real survival situation where shit is really south and it's do or die, basically, all bets are off. And I say that even insofar as if you had to hunt human beings to eat, you do what you got to do. And these kinds of things have happened in the past. There have been situations where people have had to eat their friends, or at least the corpses of their friends. Like, for instance, there was an Andes plane crash in the 70s, and cannibalism occurred. It was that or die. And there are people who survived that plane crash and have told their story, and they survived because they did what they had to do. So in a true survival scenario, all bets are off. Now, if things are just kind of like going more off the grid sort of style, there are vegan preppers. There are vegan preppers. You can find YouTube channels about vegan preppers. There are blogs for vegan preppers. So you could even be a vegan prepper, and grow your own food, etc., and do it as healthfully as possible. So it really depends on the situation. But in a true everything is fucked survival scenario, I would say all bets are off. And I know other vegans, like Vegan Gains, for instance, agrees with this one as well. All bets are off in that scenario. You've got to do what you got to do to survive, because it literally is life or death. But a lot of people I think they mistake what is a true survival scenario from what's just a little tough. So Giorgio says, I eat between 30 and 40% of my calories from fat, almond butter, peanut butter, flaxseed, avocado, Brazil. Those are great sources, by the way. And I feel really great, and I reach my calorie goals with IF and a couple of meals continues. But while on high carb, I always felt hungry. Even with huge volume of meals, I always felt full but never satisfied, which kind of sucks. Thoughts on this? Some people do better with fats. I'm one of them. It's one of the reasons why I've liked ketogenic diets or cyclic ketogenic diets for a short term, trying to like get my body fat to a certain point and then I kind of stop. Because I just feel more satiated with higher fat, with slightly higher fat and more protein combined and lower carb. I just get more satiated faster. And this is something that I've seen in research too about keto diets, that there are people who just feel more satiated on a keto diet. And so they're able to stick to it. They're able to adhere to the diet a little better because of satiety. So you might be one of those people who just does better with higher fat in your diet, and 30 to 40% is fine. In fact, the American Heart Association recommends up to like 45%, I believe. It's like 20 to 45%. It's a pretty wide range. So you're within the American Heart Association's range for healthful eating and fat intake. So if you find that you're doing better up at 30 to 40, hey, more power to you if that's what works for you. That's why there are ranges. That's why there's even protein ranges. You have to kind of like toy with that range and see what's working for you. It's even for people who are, certified nutritionists and dietitians, they have to work with their client or patient to find what is suiting them best. Because, you can't just, it's not a one size fits all, really. That's why there are, even for bodybuilders, there's a range of protein intake, for instance. Hey, Cory, can you, Johnny Bloom says, hey, Cory, can you go beat up Devin Tracy? For those who don't know, Devin Tracy is Atheism is Unstoppable. He keeps threatening your buddy Isaac. What's he saying to Isaac? I know he's being a cunt right now, Devin Tracy is, to vegans because he's being put in his place. I haven't gotten involved myself in the whole Devin Tracy thing because I think that Isaac and Vegan Gains are doing a great job. But if he's making actual physical threats to my friends, I would be curious about that. Isaac and I talk a lot, and he hasn't brought it up that he's getting any threats. I guess it wouldn't be the first time. It's funny because Abastiel Isel Mazard has challenged, for instance, Isaac to boxing matches in the past. But yet, where's Richard in my challenge to a boxing match? It's like, don't challenge the guys who look like they can actually crush you with one finger. Challenge the guy who you think you could beat up because he's not built. It's kind of sissy. So Devin Tracy's being a sissy because Vegan Gains is going after him as well, and is he making threats to Richard? That's sort of sissy-ish. It's not sort of sissy. It's actually very sissy-ish. I've lost a lot of respect for Devin. I thought he was a lot more logical than that. But there's a lot of people who come across as very intelligent on various topics, but then when it comes to veganism, there's like this wall. They hit this like mental wall they can't quite get past. It's like that barrier. It's that cognitive dissonance, and I've seen this time and time and time and time again. Time and time again. What's his name? I can't think of his name right now. Oh, fuck. Hawkins, I think his name is. The guy who always attacks Christianity or debates Christians and shit like that. Richard Dawkins. That's it. Jordan Peterson are good examples of they're otherwise intelligent guys that just seem to hit a brick wall when it comes to veganism. I mean, Dawkins even admits that it's the most moral way to live, ethical way to live, but he isn't a vegan. There's a cognitive dissonance there. So, in the case of veganism, Devin Tracy is being a moron. Let's be real here. F22 Fighter Jet says, do you think people can be healthy eating meat in moderation while eating lots of fruits and veggies? Look, I don't agree with eating meat, but there are people who, I guess, do it somewhat healthily. But the point here is that moderation, what is moderation? Just because you find some people who can live past 100 doing it, you're still taking in carcinogens. You're still taking in high dietary cholesterol, which has been linked in metabolic ward studies to heart disease. So meat in moderation, what does that mean? Yes, eating a lot of fruits and vegetables is healthy. And yes, there are people who eat meat, like a little bit of meat, and end up living, and people who even eat a lot of meat who end up living very long lifespans. But it's kind of like with smoking. While there are people who can do it, I guess, so it can be done, you know, who can smoke like 10 packs a day and live to 115, it doesn't mean you should, because there's enough research to show that it's very harmful to your health. So that's how I look at that. And besides, why? You can get everything you need from a vegan diet. There's no need for you to consume meat products, you know, animal products, that is. There's no need for you to do that. You can get all of that from plant-based diet. I don't understand why people want to put those kinds of things into their body and cause that kind of harm when there's an alternative. I just don't get it. It's not logical to me. Next question. Rebirth says, I just kicked up my gym going to 5 to 6 days per week. I used to do 3 to 4 tops, and I'm getting steroid-like gains. Do you think this is the ticket for me? I finally don't look skinny as fuck. Hey, some people might need that level of frequency. I do find with, 4 days a week for me. I find a lot of folks, a lot of naturals do fine with 4 days a week. That they begin to burn out a bit when they go up 5, 6 days. But regardless of whether you're doing 4 days, 3 days, or 6 days, as long as you're hitting everything at least twice per week directly, like a push-pull leg for 6 days, for instance, push-pull legs, push-pull legs. For 4 days, upper body, lower body, or even push-pull, including your legs in your push or pull workouts, like for instance, squats and push, deadlift and pulls. And for 3 days a week, full body, that is optimal for optimizing gains. So I don't know what your 5 day a week or 5, 6 day a week program looks like, but it could be that you're somehow increasing your frequency. Not just, I hope you're not doing a bro split, but if you're increasing your frequency in that 5 to 6 days, that could be why you're noticing a better gains. And it's not just, keep this in mind, guys, it's not just muscle, it's strength too. Both are improved as a natural by training everything more than once a week directly. So squatting twice a week. I wouldn't do deadlifting twice a week. It's a little hard in the CNS. But you can do deadlifts one day and do hip thrusts another day. But squatting twice a week, it could be front squats, back squats, whatever. Benching twice a week, overhead press twice a week. Maybe one day do a standard overhead press. Maybe the next day do a snatch grip behind the neck overhead press, what's known as a Klokov press, for instance. Because Andre, I think his name is Andre Klokov, the Olympic lifter, uses that particular press to improve his overhead press strength and his snatch as well. But you can, as long as you're hitting all the big things twice a week, with the exception maybe deadlifts, unless you can just handle that much volume on deadlifts and frequency on deadlifts. You're going to see better gains than doing a bro split. Bro splits are thing of the past. Now they're not like, you can still gain muscle on them. Sometimes it's okay to cycle and do like a cycle of like a bro split to back off a bit from frequency, maybe to periodize things a little bit, the way you're training your frequency at least. You can do that. It's valid. And there are exercise, there's physiology experts that actually recommend that kind of thing, cycling's different kinds of training styles. But generally speaking, a higher frequency is going to be your best bet, generally speaking. Unkar says, please make a video addressing Western youth. We need it. I do like to throw in a lot of topics. And I know it's not necessarily related to veganism. And I keep saying this, and I got to put this out there. Some of my videos, like, for instance, men becoming pussies, that isn't related to veganism. Yes, it's not directly at least, but indirectly, it can affect veganism. So, bad policies being brought in, like, people who come from wildly incompatible cultures that mistreat animals being brought in, but opening the borders, for instance. SJWs co-opting movements, they need to be called out for their bullshit. Intersectionals to be called out for their bullshit. So there is definitely call for some of these social topics on a vegan channel because they need to be fucking said, because it's harming veganism as well. That's why I do it. Intersectionalism is bad for veganism. As soon as Isaac can get his damn part of his video done over to me, that collaboration about intersectionalism will be happening. So I'm just waiting for him. He's been so busy. I don't blame the guy. He's very busy. So Vegan Games says, would you, that's Vegan Games, by the way. I don't think that's Vegan Gains. I don't think it's Vegan Games' other channel either. Would you leave Earth for Mars? Might be worth it if taxes are better plus higher IQ society. I've actually thought about this before. It might be a lot of fun, actually. You know, getting away from a lot of the shit that's down here, basically, and all the shit that's going on down here. But if they do settle Mars, you know, I'd hope they do it in a way where they don't make the same mistakes that we have here on Earth. So yeah, really select for high IQ, good physical health, things like that, quality genetic characteristics in the people that you'll be putting on Mars. Because ultimately they might be starting families on Mars too. So you're going to get potentially a more eugenic crop of people living on Mars, settling on Mars, the first settlers on Mars, by doing such a thing. Astronomy is a big love of mine. You know, I love veganism. I love exercise science. I love, you know, nutritional science. But astronomy is probably one of my first loves. Studying the planets, studying the stars. I'm massively into that. That's one of my favorite sciences. I know I don't talk about it on this channel, but it's definitely one of my favorite sciences. And I have been studying it and reading about it since I was a very young kid. I love it. I'm fascinated by the planets, especially. Extrasolar planets, especially, like not just the ones in the solar system, but ones in other solar systems. I'm fascinated by the possibilities. There are some really wacky planets out there, guys. I don't know if you've read about some of the very interesting, almost unusual worlds that exist out there in space. Like, you know, some shit that would make for a sci-fi horror film. Like, there's a planet, for instance, that has like, because of the pressure in the atmosphere, it causes basically like, the glass forms, basically glass forms in the atmosphere, and there's these hurricane-like winds that circle the planet. So basically, if you were to stand on that planet, you'd just be bombarded with like spiraling glass. It's fucking frightening. There's some frightening planets out there. Anyway, that's completely off topic. LSR Music says that, by the way, the beard is absolutely kingly. Thank you. I decided to go for that like very medieval kind of look, on that Viking sort of look. I feel like it plays up in the gym as well. I just, like, you know, when I see myself with a beard in the mirror, it's like it just kind of, I don't know, it just looks more primal. It's a lot more fun to train and looking this way. I know it sounds so shallow, but it is. It's weird how just little tweaks in how you dress and how you look can actually affect even your performance. It's very strange. Anyway, yeah. Let's see. Giorgio asked, do you know if too much fiber can reduce muscle protein synthesis? I mean, 100 to 200, 120 grams a day, which is really high, but typical for some vegans. Never read anything about that. If anything, fiber can bind to the estrogens in your body. It's been shown in research to do so. So when you, you know, crap out that extra fiber, you're actually defecating out excess estrogens from your body. So vegans, this is probably one of the reasons why vegans do have higher testosterone on average than meat eaters. And even vegetarians, because of the excess fiber intake, and it probably just helps. Like, I don't think they controlled for that. Actually, I don't think they controlled for that. They did control for diet, but I'm not sure to what extent. I know it was like whether it was healthful or what have you, but vegans naturally do get a whole fucking load of fiber because for some reason we have higher testosterone levels. I mean, it's not gratuitously higher. It's like 6-7% higher testosterone levels. While having higher SHBG as well, which is weird because SHBG binds to testosterone and makes it unavailable. It doesn't make it. It reduces the availability of the testosterone. So it's interesting that we have higher bioavailable testosterone too, free testosterone, by about 4% in that regard. It's interesting, and I don't know the reasons for it. I don't know. It's just it's weird, but it could be one of the things too, reducing the estrogen in the body. And perhaps the conversion to estrogen. Interesting. It's interesting. Let's see here. Moving along. IJOP says multiple sclerosis. I have no idea what he's asking about. It's a horrible degenerative condition. Ognosh XYZ says, how did your waist and pant size change throughout your lifting journey? My waist has never been tiny. That might have been because of starting martial arts at a very young age, specifically striking. arts, so I was doing a lot of kicking and a lot of holding static kicks in the air and things like that. And my obliques developed like a motherfucker from a very young age, back when I was forming, when my body was still forming, because I started martial arts in my adolescence. And that probably had an effect on my waist size, because I've never been able to get the lowest I've been when I was unhealthfully skinny at one point in time in college. And I mean, I was really unhealthily skinny at one point in time. I just wasn't eating a lot back then. It wasn't because I was trying to starve myself. I just was so busy, I guess. And I was also very active with the treadmill at the time. It was a bad idea. I was doing everything wrong. I wish I knew back then what I know now. The skinniest my waist ever got was down to 33 inches. Typically, I hang around 34. So, hey, whatever. Arnold Schwarzenegger had a 34-inch waist. Ronnie Coleman had a 38-inch waist. You know, is what it is. You know, Arnold hid his wider waist by doing posing techniques like twisting his body, for instance. So, anywho. Joni says, why do vegan foods suck? Why majority of us kids have to be forced to enjoy vegetables, but that rarely happens with meat? I'm not sure. I don't think I fully understand your question. Like, I don't think vegetables suck. I mean, have you ever had, for instance, you know, sauteed where they get to a little bit of a crisp on the outside broccoli? It's amazing. I love broccoli. Broccoli is like one of my favorite vegetables. And also the fact that it's anti-aromatase as well. It's incredible. Broccoli is like the vegetable for like people who lift. It's like a great vegetable. So is spinach. So are beets, because they contain nitrates that help you get a better pump and better blood flow. So, but broccoli tastes fantastic. I don't know. I guess like maybe kids, I don't know. Kids associate vegetables with like too much health. They want to eat their candy and shit. I mean, I don't know. I grew up in America, so I guess my opinion is a little more skewed, because Americans are definitely not the epitome of health and haven't been. So, I mean, they call it the SAD after all, the standard American diet. So, Ognash says 12% body fat is quite slim, right? What's your average? What's that for an average male? 32 waist. It depends. 12% body fat might be 32 to 34-inch waist for some guys. For some guys, it might be, if they're a little thicker in the waist, it might be a little higher than that. It really, that waist size has to do with your genetics. Sure, your waist is going to lean out, but your bone structure and where your muscles are and how big your muscles are and what have you, and placement of your muscles, insertions and everything are just genetic, you know. So you'll lean out. Yeah, 12% is pretty damn lean, but whether you're going to have a tiny waist is really genetic, to be honest. Because, I mean, lifting can affect it to some degree too, but there are people who deadlift really fucking heavy and their waist doesn't explode in size. I know some guys at my gym, for instance, that have pretty decent deadlifts that have pretty tapered waists. So, you know, it's really genetic to some degree. I mean, it doesn't mean it can't boost the size of your waist a bit, but hey, I mean, I'd rather look like a tank than look like, you know, one of these fitness models, to be honest. I just like that they call it bear mode. I think bear mode just looks more it looks more warrior like, you know, so than as fitness models like your Jeff Sides and shit. Let's see here. Men's Beauty says, you once linked a study where more muscle is associated with better health. Could it not be that these people who have more muscles tend to do more exercise and eat better than normal people? I'd have to recall the specific study, because some studies do control for factors such as dietary intake, activity level, that sort of thing. I can tell you this: there was a study where they controlled pretty well. They took people and they watched them over a course of like, I think it was 10 to 20 years. They followed these folks from middle age until their senior years. And they divided them into like 4 groups. There was people who had really no muscle at all. There were people who had, you know, moderate muscle, people who were, you know, kind of built, and people who were just fucking flat out jacked. Men and women, by the way. And they found that the more muscle you had, the lower your rate of all-cause mortality. You know, So the bigger, more muscle you have. Now, granted, taking steroids and things like that is going to increase your mortality rate by a number of ways, other pathways. But let's say you're natural and you get as big and strong and jacked as you possibly can. You're going to have lower all-cause mortality because of that. And if you're a vegan and you're lowering your cancer and heart disease rates already because by virtue of your diet, it's even going to be better for you. So this is why I advocate not just a vegan lifestyle, but also lifting, building your strength, building your muscle size, because that is going to improve your quality of life. That's why I don't just push veganism. I push veganism with those other. I push just being a better human here. This channel. Rebirth says, I'm so sick of people complaining about taxes. Taxes are very fair if you take the time to learn tax code instead of watching Vegan Gains' worst sub videos. Taxes are important. I mean, they do go to programs that we all can use, and roads and the police force and the military and things like that. However, I don't want to see taxes raised anymore just to keep giving it as handouts to play Robin Hood either. I do have a degree of libertarian mindset in that regard. I want as limited as possible while still maintaining infrastructure. I just think that socialist welfare programs are relatively dysgenic. So, XY says, any data on bodybuilding diets with respect to specific racial groups, like what diets have a higher probability of working better for what group of people, if that's even a thing? I know that diet can play a role. There was a recent study that came out, recent as in a year ago, I think, that showed that your ancestry, what your ancestors did, literally what they did, not just what they ate, but what they did, whether they were successful pioneers or maybe they were warriors or what have you, that echoes in your genetics, your DNA today. So it is definitely an argument for nationalism. But at the same time, their way they ate also affects you. And the study concluded that doctors who don't take ethnic background into account when dealing with dietary aspects or health aspects relating to diet of their patients are doing a massive disservice. And we do know that some races have a higher rate of lactose intolerance, for instance, other races. Some races digest particular kinds of carbohydrates better than other races. There's individual evidence of this sort of thing as well. So yeah, I could see that being the case even with bodybuilding, when you're consuming gratuitous amounts of food to build muscle and strength and or maintain muscle and strength, that you would want to take in your genetics, just as you do with lifting, into account with how you eat. So yeah, there's some truth to that. Definitely some truth to that. But I haven't really read too much into, how, for instance, a white person should eat compared to somebody who is Asian or somebody who is African or somebody who is, and then of course you have to break it down even within there, because if you look across Europe and across Africa, you have different genetic haplogroups across Europe. You have completely different genetic haplogroups in Africa, and you have different haplogroups over in Asia. So, even between those different genetic haplogroups, you might have genetic different diet variations as well. So there is the diversity amongst the Europeans and amongst Africans and amongst Asians, etc. So that is true. So it might even be broken down beyond just, for instance, the generalization of skin tone. So moving forward. Rebirth says, Cory, how do you deal with the easy availability of women and temptation of living in New York City? I don't like sluts. That's very blunt, I guess, but I'm just going to put that out there. I don't like slutty women. I don't hang around guys who drink a lot of alcohol. I don't go to clubs and bars and shit. I don't like that kind of scene. I don't like that kind of mentality. I don't like those kinds of people. I don't get on with them. They have different tastes than I do. So we're just different. We're in different worlds, basically. Yeah, there's a lot of pretty women in New York, but there's also a lot of shitty behavior in New York that seems to be tolerated too. It's a very liberal city. I guess that's just how. And I guess I'm naturally more monogamous. When I'm in a relationship like I am right now, I don't have any urge to explore that sort of thing. I still recognize, hey, there's a hot chick, she has a really nice ass or something. I can see those sorts of things. I'm not blind, but I don't. I guess because I pick a partner that I deeply care about, deeply respect, and find attractive, I don't find myself missing something, I suppose, that would cause me to want to stray. And if I did, I would not, it wouldn't be that I would jump astray. What I would do is I'd step back and say, hey, maybe there's something wrong with my relationship. If I'm feeling like I'm missing something and I can get it outside my relationship, that means there's something wrong in my relationship, something that's missing in my relationship. And I need to assess that. Maybe I'm not with the right girl, or, maybe there's something that we need to be talking about, that kind of thing, That's how I look at that, So I guess that's how I deal with temptation. I'm just not naturally prone to just jumping on anything I see, basically. And I mean, and I've been groped by women here, and just people I don't even fucking know, men as well, by the way. I don't swing that way, but I've had men and women grope me in the city. I've had girls. To give you an example, about a year ago, I was walking home from the gym, and I was like flipping through my MP3 player because I'm always tuned into music when I'm traveling to the city here. And I was flipping through my MP3 player. It was like a Friday night, I guess. It was 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, something like that. It was kind of like, I guess, the time people were going to bars and clubs. And I was walking along, and just out of fucking nowhere, some girl gropes my biceps. I didn't even get a good look at what she looked like. I could tell it was a girl. She was with a group of girls, and she reached out and groped my biceps. And I'm like, wow, what the fuck? She had very clammy hands. It was kind of, but then again, I was sweaty myself, so it's like, that. But but still, this is a city where people are very forward, and there's a lot of temptation, I guess. But it depends on the person, I suppose. It depends on your willpower, I guess, and how your brain is wired and that sort of thing. Anyway, long answer to a very simple question. Moving along. Ognash says, do you ever play PC or console games? And if yes, what are your favorites? I don't often, but I do like the Mortal Kombat games. I do have up to the most recent Mortal Kombat on my PC. And I love the Elder Scrolls games. I don't play Elder Scrolls Online, but I do have everything up through Skyrim. And of course, I Oblivion and Daggerfall and Morrowind and all of those. And I started with Daggerfall, actually. Daggerfall, I remember I'm back about 1997, just fucking loving snow days home from school because I could fucking just there and play Daggerfall. And that was my first jump into the Elder Scrolls series, and it was just so immersive. But yeah, I don't really have time for games now, but I do every now and then will pop one out. The Grand Theft Auto games can be fun, but that's really about it for games, really. F22 Fighter Jet says, when does the male body naturally start filling out, and does lifting during and after the end of puberty help? Your thoughts? The best time to start lifting, really the best time to start lifting is now. For any of you watching this, I don't care if you're 45. I don't care if you're 55, 20-something, 30-something, whatever. Lift. Go lift. Your body will thank you for it. And there have been studies where they've compared guys who were senior age with guys who were in their 20s and 30s. And, it's like 60-year-olds versus guys in their 20s and 30s. And muscle growth is relatively the same. There's really not much significant difference. Strength is a little bit different. Like, it's a little bit less for the older folks, but muscle growth is still, so you can build muscle as a senior. You can build muscle. And I advise you guys now, if you haven't started lifting and you're still 20 or 30 something, or even in your early 40s, start lifting now to prepare for a better quality of life ahead of you in the future. to remain able, to remain strong, you know, to have healthy hormones and healthy sex drive, etc. But if you want to talk about natural testosterone levels, I guess the most optimal time to begin lifting is like 17 or 18 years old, according to how male pattern testosterone levels go. That's like the highest your testosterone will ever be in normal range is around 17 or 18. So yeah, if any of you guys listen to this, if you are like a teenager right now, you're like 15, 16, get to the gym and begin lifting properly. You are at your peak. Get in there and realize those gains now. You know, take advantage of those higher testosterone levels now. But how long does it take the body to start filling out? It can depend on the person. I've seen girls, for instance, at my gym, and I mean, these are girls, and so guys are going to be even a lot more noticeable. But girls who have been lifting for about 6 weeks begin to see development in their triceps and development in their deltoids, and you know, upper chest region, and their mind muscle connection improving in just 6 weeks. You know, but I'd say you'll notice changes in your body in 3 months. You'll notice significant differences in how you look. By 6 months, you'll look very different. By a whole year in, you'll be like a totally different person. And then you just kind of build from that foundation there on out. Giorgio says, there's a lot of new research on EAAs, or essential amino acids, and BCAAs. I'd love to see a video on this. I started taking HumaPro EAAs, and I really love them. I really find them helpful in maintaining, and his question continues, and maintaining, the fuck? I can't find where that question continued. Anyway, I have no idea where that question continued. Just completely jumped down. Oh, and even gaining muscle during a cut despite reducing protein intake. That's really the best time to take EAAs and BCAAs, is when you're in a deficit of some sort. That's when it's been shown to really be beneficial. Or if you're training fasted, that's been beneficial too. They have shown that EAAs between meals and vegans can actually double protein synthesis rates as well. Specifically in vegans, taking EAAs between meals, 6 grams or something like that. So a couple times a day between your meals would approve that as well. I actually lay that out on Beast Mode by Science ebook. Water Dragon 2012 says SJWs are giving veganism a bad rap for sure. Yeah, no doubt, no doubt, no doubt at all. In my problem with it is that it's not just what they say, which people could really just ignore, I guess. It comes down to the fact that they cry so loudly and give us a bad name in general. So instantly, when you tell someone you're a vegan, they just assume you're some kind of a hippy dippy, you know, socialist loving, communist dick sucking, you know, far lefter that, you know, wants to see white men disappear, basically. They think that that's what they associate veganism with, and that's unfair because the animals don't give a fuck about any of that. They don't give a fuck about any of that. They're dying. You know, so veganism has nothing to do with any of that. It has to do with just living a more moral and ethical lifestyle. It's really what it comes down to. Nothing to do with your political beliefs. But unfortunately, it becomes associated with the loudest members of the group. Anyway, so Rebirth says Klokov press is the shit. I'm glad you know about it. Yeah, the Klokov press, again, for those guys who don't know on here, it's a behind the neck press. Basically, what you do is you set up like a squat. You put the bar in a squat bar, and you set up your weight, usually about 75% less than your overhead press max. And you step under the bar, so it's on your traps. I'd recommend going with a high bar on this one. Just it's a little bit easier to start with. And then you kind of step back, and you're supporting it with a snatch grip, so your arms will be wider out to the sides instead of your typical overhead press kind of grip. And you step back, and you press from there. You press behind your neck from there until lockout, and then back down again onto your traps to lock out, and you keep repeating that, and then you just re-rack it like you would a squat. Now, some people have a problem with mobility, and if you do, I wouldn't push below where, or if you can't even get it up from your shoulders, re-rack and just try to do it from behind your head. Work on your mobility, maybe do some mobility drills. But the snatch grip tends to feel a little bit, which is a very wide grip, tends to feel a lot more comfortable for people and feels like there's less impingement risk doing behind the neck pressing with a snatch grip. But even said, if you feel like it just doesn't feel right to you at all, don't do it. An alternative, you see the snatch grip behind the neck overhead press really fires the lateral deltoids and your traps. It really hits the shit out of them. Your triceps aren't so much involved. A good alternative would be either snatch grip presses from the front, which will probably involve more anterior deltoid, or standing dumbbell presses, which also hit really hard your lateral deltoids as well. And Athleen says, Cory, what are your thoughts on foam rolling? I think it's great. In fact, I own a foam roller, and when I have a little bit of a twinge or something, I roll out that area of my body if it's something that I can access. I also have a TENS unit that I use where it's like an electrical impulse unit, and I kind of like put it over an area that feels a little sore. If a joint is feeling a little bit of sore, I actually got that idea from my physical therapist when I had a TFCC tear. He would do heat pad, a moist heat pad with a TENS unit for 15 minutes, and then we'd massage the area, and then we'd do things like bending of bands and various light work to work on that area of my body. So I learned a little bit about helping muscle aches and pains through him that I even apply to this day without having to go to a physical therapist. So yeah, I mean, foam rolling, heat pads, icing. I have a TENS unit. These are all good things to have if you're a very active person. And of course, if something's really fucked up, you go to a doctor. Don't try to cure things yourself that might actually require a doctor. Like you have a tear, go to a doctor. George says, what are my thoughts on human-caused climate change? Now, look, I'm kind of agnostic on some of that issue because I've seen evidence for that and evidence against that. I don't know where. I have to study it more, I guess, before I can really feel like I'm educated enough to talk about that. Now, that being said, there are obvious factors involved in meat production and farming animals that does involve resource use like water, land use. It does release emissions in the atmosphere. So we do know for a fact that being vegan is more helpful to the planet, even if you just consider the resources being expended. But broader speaking, I need to do more research on that before it's one of those kind of things like the JQ, for instance, that everyone tells me about, but I'm kind of agnostic on it because while some things seem pretty obvious, I don't have enough that I feel like I'm in the right place to speak about it. I have a very assertive opinion on the matter. Kogalan J says, what's your opinion on Taekwondo as a martial art and as a sport sparring? It's fine. I don't particularly care for the fact that they don't guard their faces very much in Taekwondo. All the TKD practitioners I've ever met, they stand with their hands down to their side. They don't. You see in Muay Thai and in Taekwondo and Muay Thai and in Kyokushin karate, for instance, we guard the face. We keep our hands up and we guard the face. But in TKD, their hands are down by their waists. And I don't particularly care for that because it leaves you open to headshots. But there are, if it's taught well, the striking is very valuable. If it's taught well, there's a lot of useless stuff in it too. It's stuff that's very showy and beautiful, like scissor kicks in the air and crap like that, and cartwheel kicks and that sort of shit. But it's not exactly effective in a self-defense scenario. But if you take the bare bones stuff, like the roundhouse kick, their front kick, even just their punching and things like that, but they're more of a kick-heavy art. Even the axe kick and the hook kick can be very useful in a combat scenario. The spinning roundhouse kick and the hook kick will require a lot of setup, but they're not as easy to throw as just a simple roundhouse kick and be effective. They do require a setup. And anybody who's a martial artist knows what I mean by that. Basically means that you segue into them from something else. So you set the technique up to work. It could be, a couple punches, including a feint or something that then spins you into the back spinning kick. That's one way that's one setup you can do. It depends on the scenario because it can be different for every opponent because when you're fighting against a resisting person, they're not predictable. That's why it's good to fight against resisting opponents, because they're not predictable. That's how you learn. And that's my problem with Taekwondo. If they don't spar, a lot of Taekwondo dojos are soft. They don't spar, or they don't spar very much, or they spar with way too much padding on. So they don't really understand how to take a blow, you know? They don't get that body conditioning from taking a blow. And yes, that means injury sometimes, too. That's where I have a problem with it. But there are some, I have seen some hardcore TKD schools where they do spar, full contact, and those guys are tough as fuck. You throw in a little wrestling or some jujitsu or something, and they're getting a pretty well-rounded base. Maybe in the case of TKD, I would suggest if you're going to use TKD as a base, learn some boxing, because they're not that punch heavy. So learn some boxing and learn some kind of a grappling to round out your TKD. That would be my advice. If you like your TKD, if you're enjoying it, that's great. If you're getting something out of it, learn some boxing on the side and learn some grappling like jujitsu or judo or something that will help you round out your abilities for TKD. Anyway, moving along. I'm going to answer a few more questions and I'm going to wrap this up. So just kind of scroll at random here. Boom. How much of a caloric surplus is best for lean mass gains? I wouldn't go much over 10 to 20% a day. Another question. Boom. That's not a question. I'm just kind of like trying to pick a question out right there, and it's not working out. It's not working very well. Repo says, Cory, have you ever met up with a subscriber for coffee or lunch, and would you be up for it? Yes, I would. I would love to meet any one of you guys. I have met people already. There's a guy named Joe. Hey, Joe, if you're watching this, shout out to you. Who I didn't meet up with intentionally, but sometimes I'll go places and people will recognize me. It doesn't happen a lot. It happens sometimes. It's a little weird because I'm kind of an introvert in that regard. So it's a little weird for me to have people just go, hey, Cory. I'm like, I don't know you. But I'm open to it. I'm open to meeting people. It's just that I guess I'm I'm always very vigilant in public. I guess it's my training, I suppose. My background, I suppose. I guess I've always been kind of a vigilant person, sort of introspective. But anyway, I was at the Cinnamon Snail one Saturday picking up some vegan donuts about a year ago. And this guy named Joe said, hey, you're Cory, right? And introduced himself as one of my viewers. He also watches Isaac's channel. And we sat down together. And I wasn't eating myself at the time because I was going to take it home with me. But he was having lunch there at Cinnamon Snail. And we just chatted, you know, about a lot of stuff. Veganism, the vegan community, life, that sort of thing. Traded numbers. And we haven't met up since. But he does now and then will text me. It's just that, you know, our schedules, I guess, haven't been aligned. I have met another guy named Stan. He's not a vegan. He does vegetarian sometimes, but he's not a vegan. But he's one of my viewers, and I've met up with him a number of times. I've hung out with him a lot, actually. We actually went to the vegan street fair last June, or it was late May or something. I can't remember anymore. Which might be coming up again, by the way, guys. If the vegan street fair is occurring again this year, I'll be going to it, conceivably, unless something happens. So if you're in New York City and the vegan street fair is happening here in New York City again, you'll likely see me there. I'll show up. So if you know, hey, keep an eye out for that. I want to try to make some of the vegan fairs around the city because I have fun meeting people there. But yeah, I went to the vegan street fair, and there was a girl that recognized me that wanted to photograph with me. Don't remember her name, but she said she watches my channel, and I think her sister or friend watches my channel too. And then there was another dude I met who was a Trump supporter and vegan who recognized me and wanted to chat for a bit too. And then there was some kid on a fucking train one. I'm serious. I was on the train, and like this kid was looking at me. Like he kept looking at me like, what the fuck? He didn't say anything. He just kept staring at me. And then he like looked over and he's like, you're Cory, right? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, I watch your channel. I'm like, oh, okay, that's why you're staring at me. It was just a little weird. But yeah, if you guys see me around New York City, you know, if I'm out and about, you know, don't be a stranger. Come up and say hi. I'm not an asshole. I'll definitely hang out with you and chat. And unless I'm in a rush to get somewhere, but I'd be happy to meet you guys. I'd be happy to meet anyone. And who knows, maybe a friendship will blossom from that too. You know, that's how I always keep my mind open for that. You know, meeting new people. Anyway, I'm gonna see if there's any super chats, because super chat people are paying to get their question answered. And I don't want to miss out on that, but I don't see any super chats right now. So I'm going to answer 2 more questions, and I'm going to cut because it's been about over an hour at this point. So let's see here. Arseny Dmitriev. I'm probably pronouncing your name wrong. Apologize if I am. If I want to start in a martial art that's useful and have no prior experience, what should I look into? If you want to you can go to an MMA school. They'll kind of teach you a well-rounded, you know, of wrestling and jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai. But if you want to like actually focus individually on the martial arts and give them a lot more attention, find a good BJJ or jiu-jitsu school, and then find like a good karate or Muay Thai school. And when I say karate, I mean literally things like Kyokushin, Enshin. If you're lucky, Daido-juku. God, if you're lucky, find a Daido-juku school. I'd love to find a Daido-juku school. It's a combination of judo and karate, a Kyokushin karate specifically. So find one of those tough-ass striking arts and combine that with some jiu-jitsu or wrestling even. And yeah, and there you go. You can either focus, which frankly I like focusing a little more because you get a little more of the nuance out of it, or just go to an MMA school if you want to kind of have it all kind of thrown at you into one little like ball sort of. But you can specialize a little better if you focus. That's my opinion. Dan St. Bernardo said Vegan Gains got a divorce. Well, I didn't hear that. I have to talk to Richard. I haven't. If he is, I want to kind of, you know, I'll reach out to him because we do talk sometimes. But I just heard that he's forced to live with his grandmother right now because of some kind of a police issue where they don't want him talking to Jasmine. I didn't know it was a divorce. That's pretty bad. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to hear that if that's the case. But I don't want to pass around rumors. So, but if that's the case, I feel very bad for him. You know, that sucks. Okay, so one more question. Let's see here. I didn't get any questions. I scrolled randomly. I couldn't find a question. So shit. It's people just kind of talking amongst each other. Anyway. Okay. Henry Steinman says, Cory, on what day should I go to the gym? I have football practice on Mondays and Fridays and Saturdays. Please help. Hey, throw in training 3 days, like Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays if you can. I guess Wednesdays too, but I would break it up a little bit because you want to have some rest time. So maybe like do like Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, and then have your football practice the rest of the week. That would be my advice. Anyway, guys, I'm gonna wrap it up at this point in time. My computer is having a shit fit because its battery is running out, and I'm gonna get it back to the base. That's annoying to move around. So thank you guys for tuning in. Check out all of my products and services and my Patreon, which, by the way, will have another private Q&A next Sunday, which might actually increase to 3 times a month soon, I'm considering. So you can sign up for my Patreon down below. It's dirt cheap. There's a number of tiers. You can pick what you want. And you can also shoot the shit with me on Patreon as well. There's also my ebooks down there as well. And thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care. Have a happy rest of your weekend. Bye-bye.